everybody to Embodying Yin. I'm Vanessa Scotto. Oh, I love your enthusiasm. I'm Vanessa Scotto, and I am one of the hosts of a podcast called Bliss and Grit. This is Brooke Thomas, my co-host, and with us today we are so excited and honored to introduce Dorothy Hunt, Jeannie Zandi, and Kieran Trace. Earlier today, we were having lunch with these wonderful women, and Kieran posed the question, what is it you guys really want to get out of this talk? You're facilitating the panel. What were you hoping for? And Brooke and I took that home and started to think about it, and what we really reflected on is, why are we talking about awakening in the body? Well, mostly because the two of us have been down many routes in our lives, and it never changed the hurt. And the way that we found home was through the body. So we're really excited to be having this talk today.
Yeah, thank you everyone for coming, and all of you for being here. So the title is Embodying Yin, Awakening in the Body, and I think that it's worth saying what we mean by embodying yin a little bit to set the frame, because that's one of those things that we could all talk about that for 6 days probably. So when we say embodying yin, we're talking about the movement of coming home, coming down and into the self, to the fertile ground of the self. And in non-dual circles, that can be a lot of emphasis, or any spiritual path, there can be a lot of emphasis on the transcendent. And as Vanessa was just saying, it's been very deeply personal for us to be really here, and here has really meant in the body, and that has been a ever unfolding universe unto itself. So when we're talking about embodying yin, that's what we're talking about is actual matter, actual flesh, body, today, for the purpose of today's conversation. And since the body is our main interest, I think that from your vantage points, it would be really interesting to hear what is the body to you. And I would like to start with you, Dorothy, there, and we can hear from all of you on...
the most introverted one.
I know. It's on purpose. We've got introvert and center. Yeah.
Center stage.
That's right. Dorothy and I have got each other on the introvert front.
Oh my goodness, what is the body? There are many bodies, aren't there? And there's the body of our absolute reality, the biggest body of all, the unnameable body. Sorry, I do talk in my head. The one that we really can't speak about because the mind doesn't go there. So there's that body. Then there's this body of interbeing where we're all connected. We're connected on that realm of body. And then there's this individual body of form, right? There's a saying that the womb of the Buddha, or we could say the womb of Christ, resides in each one of us. So out of that, this body appears. It appears however it does, moment to moment to moment to moment. And of course, we can talk about the physical body. That's this network of neurons and chemistry and flesh and bones and ligaments and all of those things. But it's just the sense of wholeness that the first body I spoke about is this body, through and through. Through and through, this body is that. So that's the thing I would like to say about it to begin.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? All right. I always, to answer any question, I have to go into my experience right now and see from this alive moment, what can I find out about body? And there's a sense of body as mystery that when I let my attention drop into what I think of as body, I find space, I find vibration, and I find the worlds of space and vibration coexisting. So I find body to be mysterious, a body to be an instrument, this physical body, and then it's like nature loves to play and form, and so the solid body, and then I can feel the energetic bodies of the beings around me, out, earth, body being when presence actually in a way thickens into something that we can perceive with our senses. That's my current answer about that.
When I think of that question, I think of a time that living my ordinary life and then very, very identified as this person with these struggles and this challenging life. And then one day, and I realize this is a rare experience, but one day my mind just blew a fuse. And the very first movement, or I almost want to say like the last thought that I ever had as a separate person was, oh my God, the body is just made of light. And I was like, and the kind of the trailing thought as it was leaving was like, it's so beautiful. We never really give it credit. Mm-hmm. And then it sort of dissolved, and I was tying my shoes, and I was like, oh my God, the body's just light. It's so beautiful. We never really give it that credit. And then as I looked up, like the wall disappeared, and there was the vast silence, and then it was clear that I was the vast silence. And it took me a number of years to learn how to inhabit. But shortly from that moment of very extreme realization, over the next few days, I lost an ability to connect with this body-mind. I just felt like I had a memory that there was a body, and the body needed like food and like hygiene, but I couldn't figure out how to organize this energy field. And I couldn't even identify it as this energy field. And I don't, looking back in hindsight, I'm not sure what that experience was, but there was this sorrow, this tremendous sorrow, like I had abandoned a baby and I couldn't find it again. And so it took me many years to re-inhabit. And I had the unique experience of kind of doing the opposite of a spiritual search. Like I just kept trying to come back. I was like the game was off suddenly and there was nothing but vastness, and I wanted the game back on. And it had everything to do with living here and being able to feel simple things like hunger and knowing what to do about that, or hygiene and knowing what to do about that. And so over the years of my own integration was to re-inhabit or reinstall this system, which of course, like all of you, had so much pain and suffering, but also pleasure, so much pleasure. And I think like part of that sorrow of this abandoned baby is like, do you remember when we were children and we would like bounce out of bed, and movement was so a part of our systems, and if it was like me as a baby, like I just would do endless cartwheels, and we would, you'd roll down the stairs and you'd like have your brothers or sisters drive you around, or we were so physical. Right? There's such a beauty of physicality that was so pleasurable in a way that was just automatic. And recently, I was at this spa, the Refuge. Those of you guys that know it, it's close to Carmel. Anyways, I was looking at this because there's all these naked bodies. They're not totally naked, they have bathing suits on, but there's tons of bodies. And I was like, I was so in ecstasy because every single body is unique. Like nothing is the same. So all of these bodies, there's nothing the same. And you can put two twins, like identical twins, and their hands are totally separate, like totally unique. Their feet are totally, like there's nothing the same. So each of us are inhabiting, in my community we call it the avatar, we're inhabiting an avatar that is so uniquely built out of you, And so my journey in exploring the body, which is a huge aspect of my own integration, goes from pure light and no body at all into trying to inhabit and getting to a point of recognizing the like profound uniqueness and being able to identify like this consciousness has chosen in this moment, because there only is this moment, to inhabit this totally unique system. Like, and you're it. Like you're it. Like your father and son, brothers, twins, not the same. And it's really cool to like go to a water park and have all these naked bodies around and notice like not like nobody's bums are the same. It's so beautiful. Thumbs are great. There's really enough of them. So that's my experience of body.
Thank you.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah, please do.
I just want to say, it was just so sweet, like both of you guys talking with your hands and coming over here. There's a sense when, as you call light, or when presence, when we're actually aware, and you can just do it right now, let your attention sink into some aspect of your flesh, your hands, your belly, and the vibration that's there. There's also a sense of preciousness. And when we touch body, I'm in love with Dorothy, I just found this out like hours ago. When we touch and consciousness is in flesh, there is like a sacrament of preciousness. It's like light comes to earth, and there's just something, you know, for all of the ways that the body has been devalued, we've tried to transcend it, get rid of it, whatever. There's something so beautiful about presence, being fleshed, and relating to itself like that.
This is skin-to-skin transmission.
Exactly, thank you.
And what we do with our babies, if we have them, or with our partners, or our friends, you know, that sense of touching is so much. It's sacred.
That's beautiful. I love it. I mean, the conference is about being human, right? And that's kind of the platform Brooke and I stand on, is being human. Yet we're talking about this beautiful awakened experience of knowing that we're energy and light. But when we talk about yin, you know, from the Chinese philosophical perception, we're talking about matter, right? And these bodies, like this flesh, this form. And so often, you know, Brooke and I wonder, why are we so drawn to the body? I mean, it's matter, it's concrete. Is it of interest? You know, what's of interest here? And one of the things we've noticed, and I'm very curious to hear your thoughts, is that it seems to us that when we look at it through the spiritual lens, we understand we're everything, we're connected, we're space, we're timeless. When we look at it through the lens of neuroscience or science, we can also see things like we store conditioning in these bodies, or so they say, right? Our brains are wired, our genetics are affected by what the generation before us went through. So what I become really curious about is your thoughts on conditioning. You know, some spiritual teachers may point to it as simply a mental stream and, you know, turn away from it. But on our journeys, what we've noticed for ourselves is it seems like the pain, the wounding, the fear, the belief systems are actually stored in the architecture of this one, of this body. And I'd love to hear more about how you all would perceive it. And perhaps, Jeannie, you wouldn't mind starting?
Ooh, I'm feeling like this feeling I get sometimes when I used to play softball and I got really low, fat pitch right in the strike zone.
Good.
So my experience is that we are a hybrid. We have this creature aspect, If we ignore it to our peril because it acts out when it's not included in consciousness. And then we have this lit aspect, and that the human being is, in a way, a koan that comes to earth and says, here, creature, angelic, deal with it. So our angelic sensibilities are so high and so beautiful, and then our capacity to actually embody and express those limited by this. In other words, I can think all I want to about sweetness or truth or light or beauty, but when I get into a traffic jam, what can I manifest? Right? Or we can really we can see this child that comes out of us, so do perfect treatment, and then what we're able to do as parents. It's like part of the heartbreak and the beauty of humanness, this sensibility with this apparent limitation, and how do we live that way? And so, in my experience, conditioning is not just a thought, it's actually, we can take Pavlov's dog, and we can prepare a steak with a bell, and every time we ring the bell, the dog salivates, the steak's not there anymore. Same for us. We can pair the survival instinct of the creature with certain experiences and triggers, and then we find ourselves behaving like crazed ferrets, and certain things happen despite our highest hopes for ourselves. And to me, part of the human walk is actually for this beautiful presence to come into contact with the frightened creature, and the presence penetrating and soothing and calming, and there's something alchemical in there that allows the conditioning to soften open. And as some of you may have experienced, when we open to who we are, a lot of that conditioning can get penetrated with light. But even after spectacular awakenings, we can still be limping in areas. Traffic is very common for people. Parenting is another one. Intimate relationship is another one. And part of the beauty, I think, of being a human being is being humbled by this, lifted by this, not bypassing this, not throwing out this, but actually drinking the cup and the mystery of the kind of redemptive quality of going to the heart of what the Christians would call a crucifixion. But it's really living that here. And so for me, conditioning is, my experiences, is absolutely has the roots in the body and roots in the survival system of the body, especially the gnarly aspects of conditioning. Not just the, say please when you say pass the salt, but the kind of conditioning that we receive that has us deeply suffering and feeling that our lives are at stake when our sweetheart leaves us, and that's sort of stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So tech moment.
Tech moment.
Play some nice music.
Yeah. Elevator music.
So conditioning is something I talk about a lot. I work with all the time. I work with all the time in all the students that I work with, and I work within myself all the time. So I have a personal relationship and a personal vernacular for it, and I have a whole way of interacting with it. So when so to go back to that, like, it's all light, isn't it beautiful, it all disappears, and then this grief and longing to return to this space. Not long after that, incredible sort of like ancient wounding that certainly didn't come from this lifetime, like it wasn't the story of Kieran as a child, but it was like much older, started to kind of rip out of the body. And it was a way that I'd be like, oh, there's the body. Like, I can see it. Oh, there it is. In this really torturous ancient memory pouring out of itself. And what would happen is I would notice that I would get incredibly exhausted if something was going to move through. And I would just like almost fall asleep. Like even walking down the street, you just like fall asleep. And then this turbulence would arise. And then before I knew it, I was like the exorcist would just be like, ah! and then this like ancient, piece would burp itself out. and it was clearly coming from the body. So because that was such a powerful and direct experience. And then I did this thing where I got a chance to go, go talk to people like Eckhart Tolle and Moni Van Golen and Thomas Stubbs, and a lot of them would look at me and be like, what's going on with her? Because I was literally like, I would do all the time. And they were like, maybe something's gone wrong, because you should just be able to go to presence, and then from presence, just sort of dissolve those knots. But that really wasn't the case. And one of the core differences was the amount of violence that this person had survived. So I was raised up in a house that had ritualistic abuse and a lot of violence in my early life. And that became clear that was a mirror of so many other lifetimes of so much violence, like all of us. We've all been burnt at the stake, and we've all been in the Inquisition and whatever. And so all of this was arising out of my system in a really intense and dramatic way. And I got to figure out how to navigate it and work with it. And I had extreme PTSD, and I know there's a lot of conversation about what is trauma versus post-traumatic stress disorder, and they are very different things. But by being able to have this level of awareness that was truly unidentified at any level, witnessing the process of how the body began to negotiate the amount of energy and presence coming through it, and triggering and opening up and softening these movements, but so much like what I would call body memory was exploding out of my system. Now, I lived with body memory prior to awakening, in the sense of being somebody with PTSD. If a car door slammed or a sound or a smell, it would trigger it. And for me, I would sometimes black out for about 3 days and wake up in some strange town somewhere and have to figure out my name again. And my body was what recalled itself. So I had a history of the trauma being stored in the body. Post-awakening, the connection with no identity and a massive amount of presence was doing something entirely different, and it was bringing such detailed memory out of the body itself that this mind and this mind stream and this imagination and this psyche didn't have information about. It was like these were blacked out places, but the body absolutely remembered. And the body had the most precise, most the smell of the smoke on the carpet, like every fucking detail was stored right in the body. And as it opened, it was like a little zip drive that would just be like, and it would just unpack the whole wounding. And so I spent about a decade just watching and doing that. And then I wrote my first book, Tools for Sanity, tracking, which was literally the tracking of that process. And I wrote that book at the beginning of my teaching career. And I began to teach based on that process that I'd spent a decade doing. And I started to notice that with all the students I worked with, the same results. The same thing was happening. It didn't matter if you were awakened or not awakened. You could access source energy. Never had anyone have a problem in our community not access it. And when source energy touched physical densities in the body, this little zip drive would unwind, and this extraordinary precision would come out that had every single detail in there. And so this became a specialty, and it's a specialty of what I teach and who I am as a teacher, which is very much to do with, I call it deleting the programs, so that original nature and our original conditioning can default. So we can default to a little more flexibility. And one thing I know for sure is that because in our work, in my healing work and what I do with the students, we don't look at the emotional stream, and we don't use the psyche. We don't pick at something, and we don't follow the emotional storyline. We connect to source energy. Some people are identified there, some people are not. It's not a preference, doesn't matter. But connecting to source energy, bringing it into the tense, achy spots in the body, and from source to physical, source to body, just pure body, the body has this extraordinary intelligence of how it unwires itself. And I have a YouTube video called Repressed Memories that fits the YouTube algorithm, and so it gets shown a lot. And I get a lot of young children, like young children meaning young adolescents, like 14 to 27, putting comments on that YouTube, talking very much about having body memories of sexual misconduct or traumatic events. And I will always tell them in the videos about it's like you don't have to figure it out. You don't have to remember. You don't have to pick at something. Give the body the opportunity for the body to unfold it when the body is ready. So that's what I mean when I say conditioning.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Clearly conditioning is held in the body. Conditioning is held in the body and the mind, and these are very interconnected, right? We can have a single moment of thought that can create incredible anxiety, and that anxiety can remind us of other times and so forth, and we're off to the races. But we're not going to liberate those places by thought or intellectual analysis. Could be helpful, but it's not going to liberate it. And I have this really simplistic view of things, that in being itself, which is the whole, things just want to be what they are. And that includes these places in ourselves that haven't been allowed to be what they are or what they were. Places of pain or hurt or abandonment or whatever. And so, what was just being said about bringing awareness, bringing your own simple awareness, right into the sensation and see what happens. Because the tendency is, I want to get away from this. I don't want to feel this pain. I really don't want to have any more of this. I've had enough, la, la, la. But it just keeps knocking on the door. Have you noticed? It keeps knocking on the door because it just wants to come home. Whatever this is that hasn't been felt, that hasn't been allowed, that has been pushed away, shut in the closet, it just wants to come back into the compassionate heart. And that is your deepest place of healing, is this compassionate heart. So, the longer we refuse something, the harder it has to knock. And so eventually, even though we may not want to, we'll open the door. Just maybe a little crack and close it, a little bit bigger crack, and just see. And of course, with trauma, we have to do it slowly. The integration of that, the felt sense of that, and we may need help for that. But just in terms of your day-to-day, something contracts. You feel a pain someplace. Just invite your own simple awareness right there, because it has no boundaries. Awareness can go anywhere. Even if your heart feels very defended, awareness has no boundaries. So it can go right in there and just be present consciously to what's here. It's kind of like, sometimes I'll use this analogy, or this experience. If you make a fist as hard as you can, and then you just let it rest in your open hand. You could do this now if you want. Just see what happens. Because first of all, we're just letting this be exactly as it is. We're not trying to pry it open. We're not trying to manipulate it. We're not trying to change it to say it shouldn't be here. But it just gets to rest in this openness that we truly are. And then you begin to see, well, what happens? Do some of you feel a little softened? Just a simple little thing here. And then awareness itself, it begins to open things up from the inside. Like thought will say, okay, I have to pry this open, I have to figure out what's happening, it's a big agenda. But this is it's so much gentler, and it's so much more based on love and compassion and clear seeing, because it's the clear seeing that's a compassionate seeing that actually has the capacity for healing, just by allowing things to be as they are.
Yeah.
I just want to add everything. That to me, in keeping with this idea that we have they can't hear me. Can you hear me now?
No.
Can you hear me now?
I think if you move it,
Closer to you.
move your level, your There you go. That might work.
Is this battery pack off?
Do you want to hand? Jeannie, here you go.
Where was I? Yeah, in here. So, to me, the roots of conditioning are a scared creature. And once I saw a wild dog outside of my mother-in-law's house. And the dog was so terrified of me, but I had a piece of steak, and I stayed there for a long time, just holding the steak out. And the process of that dog coming closer, 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 and learning no harm, no harm, showed me or modeled this way that the deepest roots of conditioning are actually a terrified creature, and sometimes our noticing can allow that place to come forward and soften, and sometimes we need somebody to hold the space for us, because that part of us doesn't necessarily know friend. The deepest roots of conditioning are aspects of us that have just actually given up on the world, given up on safety, given up on tender treatment. And so often, whether it's our own gentle consciousness or borrowing the gentle consciousness of another human being, the process of just consciousness itself as a harmless, witnessing, warm, what did you say? Flesh to
Skin to
flesh
skin, yeah.
skin to skin transmission, that presence can actually, through contact, bring itself to bear on the parts of us that have fallen into the shadow and are operating in funky ways. So I just want to say that of the creature.
Yeah, and I would add to.
I'll give that to Vanessa. You're double mic'd there.
I'm sure some of you, if not all of you, are in the awakening process, whatever we're going to call that. And so many people, even after big openings, authentic awakenings, all this stuff starts coming back. Have any of you noticed that? I thought I dealt with that in therapy years ago. Why is it here? What am I doing wrong? But this is the movement of love itself, to bring this back, to be liberated, to be seen, to be transparent. If you shine light in darkness, the darkness doesn't actually go away. It just merges with the light. So that's kind of what we're talking about here. How when source, if you want to use that word, awareness, if you want to use that word, mystery, if you want to use that word, when it just touches itself consciously as this that's fearful, then something begins to happen. So it comes back for the things in the body, my point,
Yeah.
And it's not a problem. It's not a problem necessarily, although it can be really challenging. But it's also the movement of love, just to want to liberate what doesn't yet know it's free. I mean, there are things in all of our bodies that don't yet know what they're made of. So we can ask that question: what is this made of? And if you go deeply enough into any experience, you can't help but bump against your true nature, because that's the source out of which everything arises, ultimately speaking.
Yeah, and I think, in what's left of our time, because you all have already started talking in a really evocative way about if we're reestablishing the importance, the sacredness of body and of being, and that conditioning lives here. You've been talking about how do we decondition ourselves from a body place? And, one of the reasons why this is such a passionate subject matter for me is that without body, I have done what a lot of people on these paths do: lost in bliss, lost in terror, lost in hell. And it's like body was always the way that actually got me to freedom. And so, on that note, I think I would like to use what's left with our time here to open it up. If any of you want to bring those questions about your own process of getting free, and how do we decondition ourselves? How do we meet this intimately in the body? Well, we have these gorgeous teachers who've meant so much to us and continue to mean so much to us. And we have a brave volunteer already.
And if there's a panelist in particular you'd like to hear from, please also note that.
You can address it to them, yeah.
Do we have a mic?
Here, I can pass around. And I'll let you take that over.
So I'm dealing with, in my process, I do this kind of work for myself and others. And I'm finding with the issue of neglect, it's harder to find the contraction or the where that stagnation, block in energy is in the body, because it's not like it's one event. What tips can you give me for when it's more amorphous like that? Or I know sometimes it shows up as numbness in the body, but helping myself or someone else trying to find it when it's neglect, it's a little bit tricky. So if anyone has anything to say on that. And is it Kieran, Trace? Yeah, I'd particularly like to hear from you. Thank you. And if anyone else wants to add, that'd be great.
Thank you. I think that's a really beautiful question, first off. And I think that's something that everybody directly experiences in their lives. They know something's up, but they can't quite find it. So if I was working with you or you're working in our program, one of the things we do is we'd use the mirror, we'd use your life. So something I will say a lot is I'll say, like, what's going on this week? Like, what's happening? And so I'm looking outside to see the mirror reflection of the jam up inside. So we might have an idea, like each one of us have our core belief systems. I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, I'm not safe, I'm not good enough, a version of not worthy, but has its own little tweaky painful bit. But one or two of those is just like so zingy for us, and we run into it constantly, which is a way of me saying the mirror keeps reflecting that story back. So very much like when you go to the mirror in the morning and your hair is totally a mess, we don't go to the mirror to straighten it. We've got to go to the head to straighten the hair. So, but it's really helpful to look in the mirror to see what's out. So because I agree 100% with what these guys are saying, that we want to move in a way that allows the body to be the leader, and we want your body to be the leader of your process. Because that's where all the intelligence is, and that's where the process is. So it's a matter of kind of going like, okay, what's happening? And then it's like, let's use something for an example. I mean, we could use your own life, but I'll give an example. So it might be like, I went to my sister's house, and my sister and I got into the usual fight that we usually get into, but this time I wasn't so triggered. And this time I managed to actually say what I really wanted to say. And that's been a really fragile place, because my sister can usually never hear that, and we get really stalemated together. And I usually leave feeling a little disheartened. But I went to my sister's house, and I've been doing all this work on this not worthy piece and not belonging piece, and I found myself presented with an opportunity to finally just put my foot in the door and say what I wanted to say. And I said it, and you know what? She heard it. And there was this moment where we really communed, and I don't know if it's gonna last, and I don't know if I go see her next week, it's gonna be the same fight, but there was that clarity. And that's where you and I get to go, yeah, you cleaned some of that mirror, right? Like we undid the knot, right? And the reverse is the same, right? Where I'm up against the same pattern and there's just no relief. And all I'm feeling in this interaction is that I don't belong, I'm not safe, I don't belong, and I'm being consumed by that movement. Then we go, okay, we need to come in and find where that tension is, right? So the first place I'm gonna go is the mirror. And I'll be like, what's going? Is it cleared there? Then we know we cleared it. Is it jammed up there? Then we know it's active and alive right now. And then where that numbness is always a sign for me that the body's not really ready yet, because it's a little bit like if you get a splinter and you didn't notice you have the splinter, but then it gets inflamed and you really notice you have the splinter and you're like, oh my God, like I must have got this like 2 weeks ago, because there's no way I got it this, but here it is. But it's a way that the body's saying, hey, I've got enough pressure, I'm gonna pop that out now and it's gonna be easy. But if you didn't notice it, you could kind of like dig forever and like little bits of it stay stuck and you're like 2 weeks later, you mostly got it, but it's you've infected it yourself. So the difference between letting the body ripen it. So if you're in the mirror and the mirror is pressurizing me, right? I'm being killed with I don't belong. I literally want to kill myself because I so clearly don't belong here. I came onto the wrong planet, people, the wrong fucking planet. So in that case, right, we go, okay, let's come into the body and find where it does hurt. Where is this incredible pain happening? And we just go wherever we can find it. And so sometimes somebody will say to me, it's my head, where usually it's the solar plexus, and there's such a pain in the solar plexus. And we'll be like, let's work there. Let's do that. Let's work at that place. And then once we can come in and soften, just exactly like, completely agree with these processes. Once we can soften and start to come in at the head level, we find that the system begins to fall open a little bit, and anything that really was right at ground zero is now obvious. And that can really be like 10 minutes of communion, like just 10 minutes, and then it's like, oh my God, I like this pain, and I think I'm having a gallbladder attack. Or like, I think I'm having a heart attack, or this restless Mexican jumping bean thing that's like, oh, okay, now we're not so numb. But it's kind of like honoring the numbness, because it's a signature the body's not quite right. And the body, and this faith that the body will present it when it's inflamed enough that the pus is just gonna, and you got all the mucus and the like, as it comes out. But then the body does it in the body's way. And it usually has no trace. It comes all the way out and there's no little jabs, no little bits left. Did that answer it? Very well.
I have something if you like it.
Yeah, I'd like it.
Sometimes
It's unruly. It's unruly out there. Control the crowd. I know. Who can control?
So there are some things that show up almost in a ghostly way. So we can't find a gnarly thing. We can't find a big thing. And in my experience, like, I would go to how you notice it now, and whether there's any sort of sense of not full contact with the moment or with yourself, or in the context of relationship and contact, to go really slowly, just noticing the ghostly aspect, noticing anything that you can notice, even the feel of just a little bit of not quite here, that sort of thing, and just very just very tenderly hang out there, kind of speaking that, noticing it, letting time slow down, finding the ground, feeling your breath, just very gently kind of coming into embodiment. But for me, those more ghostly things, they need a lot of slowness. It's like almost like shy and in a cave kind of thing, in contact.
It's
not really resonating.
I was just going to say, so many things are frozen, right? Yeah. And so it's like the sun of awareness just begins to melt little by little by little. You don't need an ice pick, but this gentle way of just moving into that sensation, little by little. It begins to thaw.
Thank you. So this is a follow-up question to that is, let's say you do feel the sensation and you feel the pain or however it feels. Often what happens for me is one of two things. It's either too painful and I just write out, Or, I mean, for example, right now, my shoulders are insanely tense and I feel it and I'm present. Then like, what do I do? Like, I feel it and I'm like, okay, so what's the next step? Who would you like to hear? Actually to you, and then also maybe to Dorothy.
Yeah. Well, I'm famous for putting people on the ground.
Just for starters, and if you'd like to get on the ground right now, feel free.
It's very
Just
game
lay
of
on
you.
your back.
Nice.
Because what the body is
Aw,
saying
sweet.
is, I don't have enough support. I need to tense, I need to rigid to hold myself together. So just let yourself feel the earth and feel the support. Yeah, feel free, everybody. Maybe all the earth over, we can all just lay on the ground for a while. And let it have breath, and let it have no agenda. When there's too much, that implies that the body needs more support. It needs more resource, it needs more ground, it needs breath, it needs soothing. And so even though it might be counterintuitive for some of us deep divers, it can be really useful just to take your attention off the pain for a little while, or keep it on just a little bit, and let yourself really find the things in the environment that support you so that you can feel your system kind of being strengthened. And this is your birthright as a human being, to feel and draw on the bulk of that earth below you. You're not meant to be pulled up from her.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And I just want to briefly, second that emotion, because for me, I've had a lot of very, very, very painful sensation. And there was this habit, because I'm a body person, it's what I've done in my career for 20 years. There was this habit of go into the pain. And what I was creating was this feedback loop of like, pain, 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 just rattling the chains. And I had to discover how to go to the ground, feel the space, feel how held I was, feel how much space there was. And that was what allowed me to heal and not keep creating almost really just like this limbic system, nervous system path of like terror, like this echo chamber. So thank you for bringing that in, because I think it's really important to remember what we're not talking about is just heat-seeking missile into the pain all the time, because that can just keep the pain going too. Yeah. This woman here.
I can't really back to
Oop. Pantsing the stage.
Thank you so much for sharing, all of you. It's very helpful. My question is how they reconcile this almost resistance inside, you all were sharing that it's almost more natural to have a trip and be there, and it's fast, it's immediate, it's knowledge, it's wisdom, it's so much. And then suddenly, at this age, I realized that there is some value of body, so I'm still kind of exploring that value. But there is a resistance to actually go back and that slowness of what it represents. Mm-hmm. I was wondering, if you could have some insights on how to maybe diminish that resistance, and also, what's the best value of even having that trip back?
Yeah. And is there any panelists, Dorothy?
Yeah. Well, the value of having the trip back is so the infinite can express itself. The value of having the trip back into the body is so the infinite can express itself in your life with those who you come in contact with. How else is it going to do it? I mean, to me, that's why the infinite has taken form, to see itself, to love itself, to relate to itself. And so if we're just hanging out up here, which it's very safe there, right? There's no problem there. But this seems to want to actually give itself consciously, in your life and mine. And this is how we can do it, through these vehicles that we have.
And any suggestion how to decrease that kind of almost, my body doesn't want that almost, or I don't know what doesn't want it, but it's not like that slowness is a little bit unpleasant.
Well, a lot of people don't, they think that I have a body, it's just luggage, I have to carry it around, it has a lot of problems and so forth and so on. And so we could maybe think about what is it like to be the body instead of just having the body. And also to realize that, suffering, we could say, is pain plus resistance. So there's some resistance. We might look at, well, what is it that is being resisted here? Without, like I say, the pickaxe, but just that sort of inquiring. What is it that just doesn't quite want to, be here? And let's face it, I mean, we're all conditioned in certain ways, right? About, how we spend money on our clothes or our hairdos or whatever. We think that we're the author of the body and it needs to look a certain way, and we put a lot of probably wasted attention on it, or misplaced attention, when really inside this body, there's something that just wants to flow out. The love that you are, the clarity that you are. So it's a flow. It's a flow up, it's a flow down, it's a flow out.
I would love to hear from the gremlin that says no. The one that says, no, I don't want to be in this body, I don't want to be embodied, I don't want to be on earth, I want to be up in the sky, I want to be an angel, I hate this denseness. I would want to hear, before I would introduce her, I would want to hear what she has to say, because that's where your life force is, it's in no.
So we only have a couple of minutes left. I see you have the microphone. We have about, I think, 3 minutes or so. Yeah, please.
So kind of in my own progression, sort of like, and I came to this kind of slowly, but really raised in a linear masculine world, engineering school, this is the only, logic ration. And then in my progression, kind of realizing, waking up and says, no, this is insane. And the yin was not, and my body was not allowed, all of this, what you're talking about, was really not primary in my life. And then sort of waking up, half the people on the planet are cyclical beings, and most of the world is dark energy and, relates to that, and Mother Earth, who we sort of abused. And so I'm like, I'm watching some of this stuff, the men making decisions in the Kavanaugh, and I'm like, and also knowing my own thought process is a lot of this is insane, that because I'm not connected to my body or Mother Earth and the yin and what Charles was talking about, and I think the person before, we've got this insane masculine linear model that's sort of running the show. I didn't just develop this on my own. It was like in the water. So how do you see that? And the one thing I think I've noticed in women is you at least have these cycles going on that we don't. This was really news to me when I discovered it. So how does that relate to what you're seeing and in the culture, and then grounding it? And do you see women more connected to it, or because they're in the same insanity with lesser positions? Whoever wants to address that.
I think we know. And we have about 1 minute, so good luck.
You're going to bring that up right at the end. Well done.
So this is the shadow of our culture, yin, the shadow of connection, of vulnerability, of embracing fragility, of interdependence, of openness. This is the shadow. And yes, because our bodies give birth, because they bleed every month, there's a sense that because within conditioning we're generally allowed more relationship with emotionality and softening, we have generally a little edge on the dudes in that department. However, we're so made to feel like aliens for
the softness and the openness and the vulnerability, as though the softness and vulnerability is what gets us hurt. And we have to man up, like you guys, because, there's just so much shame and so much in you guys and in us for this softening that we are craving as a species, and the earth is craving that. And it's completely possible for men to soften, open, and feel the seasons, and feel the earth, and feel their own emotional seasonality. But in my experience, men have to feel like someone has their back while they turn their attention to them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we just want to thank you guys so much for being here with us. This is very sentimental for us. And to all of you, I mean, it is beyond an honor to be able to sit up here with you and to know all of you. And we're just so grateful. So thank you. Thank you, Stan. Thank you.